She never imagined watching him marry someone else. He never expected her to accept the invitation. Their past seemed settled until the day she walked into his wedding. 5 years ago, Melissa Campbell handed back a diamond ring and walked away with nothing but her dignity. Today, she's a business powerhouse who's turned heartbreak into empire. But when Mason Peters, the man who shattered her heart, unexpectedly invites her to witness his wedding to another woman, something doesn't add up. Is this an olive branch? A misguided attempt at friendship? Or something more calculated? What would you do if someone who broke your heart invited you to witness their happiness? Would you decline? Or would you show up looking absolutely unforgettable? Welcome back, beautiful souls, to Sage King Stories, where we explore the hidden depths of human relationships and the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. I'm so grateful to have you joining me today, whether you're a longtime listener or just discovering our storytelling family. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I love imagining all of you around the world, connected by these stories we share. Today's tale explores how success can be the sweetest form of closure. So settle in, perhaps with a warm drink, and let's journey into the story of a woman who discovered her power in the most unexpected venue. Melissa Campbell stood at her office window, 40 stories above Manhattan. From this height, the city looked like a meticulously designed circuit board, orderly, purposeful, and entirely under her control, just like her life. At 32, Melissa had become what business magazines called a quiet force, the founder of Luminary Solutions, a consulting firm that specialized in salvaging failing businesses and turning them profitable again. Her reputation was immaculate, her methods ruthless but ethical, and her success rate unprecedented. She adjusted the sleeve of her tailored blazer and checked her watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that cost more than her first car. The meeting with Japanese investors would begin in 15 minutes, plenty of time to review the final points of her presentation. Then her assistant knocked. "Sorry to interrupt, but this came by courier, marked personal." Andrea placed a cream-colored envelope on Melissa's desk and lingered, curious. The envelope was thick, expensive, with Melissa's name handwritten in confident calligraphy. No return address. She sliced it open with her letter opener and removed the contents. Her expression didn't change, but her grip tightened enough to create a small crease in the heavy cardstock. "Mason Peters and Isla Montgomery request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration." The invitation transported her back 7 years to her senior year at Columbia. Mason Peters had been brilliant, ambitious, charming, with family connections that practically guaranteed his success. They'd met in advanced corporate finance, competitors turned study partners turned lovers. By graduation, they were inseparable, planning a future that combined his family's old money with her innovative business strategies. Their engagement lasted 18 months. 18 months of meeting with wedding planners, of apartment hunting, of building dreams. Then came the dinner at the Peters estate in Greenwich. "You're wonderful, Melissa," Mrs. Peters had said with practiced warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "But Mason needs someone who understands our world. The social obligations, the family legacy." Melissa had felt the unspoken judgment beneath the polite words, the subtle implication that her background, her very being, didn't fit their narrow definition of our world. 2 days later, Mason returned to their apartment, avoiding her eyes. "My family's right," he said, his voice hollow. "We want different things. You're so intense about your career. I need someone who will support my path." He'd left her engagement ring on the coffee table. 3 carats of memories, abandoned like a receipt for a forgettable meal. Melissa didn't beg. She didn't cry, not in front of him. She simply nodded and said, "You're making a mistake, Mason, but it's yours to make." That night, after he left, she allowed herself exactly 1 hour of tears. Then she washed her face, opened her laptop, and began drafting the business plan that would eventually become Luminary Solutions. The pain became fuel. The rejection transformed into determination. Every time a potential investor said her ideas were too ambitious, she heard Mason's voice calling her too intense, mingled with the echoes of countless belittlements she'd faced as a black woman climbing the corporate ladder. And every time, she proved them wrong. Now, holding his wedding invitation, Melissa felt nothing but a distant curiosity. "Is that what I think it is?" Andrea asked, recognizing the formal styling of a wedding invitation. "Mason Peters is getting married," Melissa replied, her voice neutral. Andrea's eyes widened. "The Mason Peters, your ex? The one who—" "Yes, that one." Melissa placed the invitation back in its envelope. "Apparently he wants me at his wedding." "You're not seriously considering going?" Andrea's protective indignation made Melissa smile. Andrea had been with her since the early days, when Luminary consisted of a shared office space and second-hand furniture. "Actually," Melissa said slowly, a plan forming in her mind, "I think I will." "Melissa, why would you put yourself through that? To watch him marry some society princess when he was too weak to stand by you?" Melissa turned the envelope over in her hands. "Because he's expecting me to decline. He's expecting me to still be hurt, still bitter." She looked up at Andrea, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "But what if I show up? What if I show up looking absolutely spectacular, completely successful, and totally over him?" Andrea stared at her for a moment, then slowly grinned. "That would be magnificent. Mark it on my calendar. 3 weeks from Saturday. And Andrea, clear my schedule for tomorrow afternoon. I need to go shopping." As Andrea left, Melissa turned back to the city view. She wondered what Mason looked like now, what he'd accomplished at his father's firm. She wondered about the woman who fit into the Peters world better than she had. Most of all, she wondered why, after 5 years of silence, Mason would invite her to his wedding. Regardless of his reasons, Melissa would attend. Not for closure, she'd found that in building her empire. Not for revenge, success had proven sweeter than any petty victory. No, she would attend because Mason Peters needed to see exactly who he had walked away from. And Melissa Campbell never missed an opportunity to make an impression. If you've ever wanted to show someone who underestimated you just how wrong they were, hit the subscribe button now. Don't forget to tap that notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. Now, let's see what happens when Melissa steps into Mason's perfect day. Whispering Oaks Estate sprawled across 30 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside, its stone facade and intricate gardens showcasing old money and older traditions. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway. Bentleys, Maseratis, the occasional Tesla for the environmentally conscious guests. Melissa's driver pulled her Aston Martin up to the entrance, where uniformed staff waited to assist arriving guests. She took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the compact mirror, and stepped out into the June sunshine. Her Valentino dress, a deep sapphire that complemented her rich brown skin and intricately braided crown, clung to her curves before flowing gracefully to the ground. The side slit revealed just enough leg to be noticeable without being inappropriate. Diamond studs worth more than most people's annual salary caught the light as she moved. She looked expensive, powerful, and entirely untouchable. "Name, please?" asked a young attendant with a guest list. "Melissa Campbell." Her voice carried the quiet confidence that commanded boardrooms. The attendant's eyes widened slightly, a reaction Melissa had grown accustomed to. Her name carried weight now, appearing regularly in business publications and women-to-watch lists. "Of course, Miss Campbell. The ceremony will begin in the Garden Pavilion in 20 minutes. May I direct you to the champagne reception?" Melissa nodded her thanks and moved toward the garden, aware of the subtle ripple of attention her entrance created. Guests in designer wear paused mid-conversation, gazes lingering a moment too long. Some recognized her, others simply recognized power when they saw it. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and surveyed the scene. Approximately 200 guests mingled among white roses and crystal decorations. Old money dominated. She could tell by the relaxed way they wore their wealth, like a comfortable second skin. Melissa noted, not for the first time in such circles, that she was one of only a handful of black faces in the sea of inherited wealth, a silent testament to the exclusive nature of the Peters world. Then she saw him. Mason stood near a rose-covered arch, talking animatedly with an older man Melissa recognized as Senator Williams. Mason looked good. He'd always been handsome, with his strong jaw and keen blue eyes. His custom tuxedo fit perfectly across broad shoulders that had once carried her laughing through Central Park after their engagement. As if sensing her gaze, Mason turned. Their eyes met across the crowd. For a brief moment, genuine shock registered on his face. His smile faltered, his posture stiffened, and he nearly spilled his drink. Melissa allowed herself a small smile and raised her glass in a subtle toast. Mason recovered quickly, excusing himself from the senator and making his way through the crowd toward her. Each step seemed reluctant, as though he were approaching something both desired and feared. "Melissa," he said when he reached her, voice carefully controlled. "You came?" "I received an invitation," she replied simply. "Congratulations, Mason. It's a beautiful setting." Before he could respond, a gorgeous black woman in a deceptively simple white gown appeared at his side, slipping her arm possessively through his. "Darling, aren't you going to introduce me?" Mason cleared his throat. "Of course. Isla, this is Melissa Campbell, an old friend from college. Melissa, this is Isla Montgomery, my fiancée, well, soon-to-be wife." Isla's perfectly arched eyebrows raised slightly at the hesitation before friend. Her smile remained fixed as she extended a manicured hand. "Campbell? The Campbell from Luminary Solutions? How fascinating. Mason never mentioned you were so accomplished." "Mason knew me before Luminary existed," Melissa replied smoothly. "I'm sure he's had more important things to discuss than old classmates." Isla's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "How did you two know each other exactly?" Before Mason could answer, a distinguished older man with silver hair approached, clapping Mason on the shoulder. "There's my boy. 20 minutes until you're officially part of the Montgomery dynasty." He noticed Melissa and extended his hand. "Richard Montgomery, father of the bride." "Melissa Campbell," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Campbell, the turnaround specialist? I read your profile in Forbes last month. Impressive work with that pharmaceutical company." "Thank you. It was a challenging project, but satisfying." "We should talk sometime. I have interests in several ventures that might benefit from your expertise." Mason interjected quickly. "Richard, I think the photographer was looking for you and Isla for some pre-ceremony shots." Richard checked his watch. "Right you are. Lovely to meet you, Miss Campbell. Enjoy the ceremony." He led Isla away, leaving Mason and Melissa alone. "You didn't tell your future father-in-law about us?" Melissa asked, amusement coloring her voice. Mason's expression tightened. There wasn't much to tell. College romance grew apart. Ancient history. "Indeed," Melissa agreed lightly, "although your bride seemed rather interested in that ancient history." Mason's jaw clenched. "Why did you come, Melissa? What do you want?" Before she could answer, the wedding coordinator announced that guests should take their seats for the ceremony. Melissa touched Mason's arm lightly, feeling him tense at the contact. "You invited me, remember? Now, you should take your place. Your bride is waiting." As Mason reluctantly made his way to the altar, Melissa found her assigned seat surprisingly close to the front. Around her, guests whispered about market trends and vacation homes, occasionally glancing her way. She caught fragments of conversation. "That's the Campbell woman. Bought out Westridge Technologies for pennies. Heard she's absolutely ruthless in negotiations." From her seat, Melissa could see Mason at the altar, repeatedly glancing toward her instead of the aisle where his bride would soon appear. He looked nervous, but not with the typical anticipation of a groom. He looked like a man watching two worlds collide, past and present converging in an unexpected confrontation. As the string quartet began the wedding march, Melissa crossed her legs and settled in to observe. Something told her this wedding would be even more interesting than she had anticipated. 5 years earlier, Melissa sat stunned in their shared apartment, watching Mason pack his things. Rain streaked the windows, casting the room in gray shadows that matched her mood. "I don't understand," she had said, voice unnaturally calm. "Last week we were discussing wedding venues." Mason avoided her eyes, methodically folding shirts into his suitcase. "My family has certain expectations, Mel. You know that." "Expectations that I don't meet," she stated flatly. He paused then, finally looking at her. "You're brilliant, Melissa. Too brilliant, maybe. My father says—" "I don't care what your father says," she interrupted. "I care what you say." Mason ran a hand through his hair. "Look, my family's firm is my future. The connections, the legacy, it's everything I've been raised for, and they need me to marry someone acceptable, Melissa finished for him. Someone who will host dinner parties and join the right clubs instead of building her own company. That's not fair, isn't it? She stood, dignity intact, despite her breaking heart. You're choosing your family's approval over our love. You're too weak to stand up for what we planned together. His face hardened. This is the real world, Melissa. Not everyone can afford to chase dreams without considering consequences. No, she said quietly. Some people just use consequences as an excuse for cowardice. The anger in his eyes told her she'd hit her mark. Without another word, he zipped his suitcase, placed her engagement ring on the coffee table, and walked out the door. Melissa had watched from the window as he hailed a cab in the rain, not looking back once. Now in the present, the memory dissolved as someone took the vacant seat beside her. She's lovely, isn't she? A deep voice commented as Isla floated down the aisle on her father's arm. Melissa turned to find a handsome man in his early 30s watching her with interest. His name tag identified him as Hudson Montgomery, best man. The bride's brother? Melissa guessed. He nodded. And you're the mysterious Melissa Campbell. You're causing quite a stir. Am I? Hudson grinned. Half the guests are wondering who you are, and the other half are wondering why you're here. Which half are you? Neither. I know exactly who you are. His eyes sparkled with mischief. You're the woman Mason used to be engaged to, the one his father deemed unsuitable. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Well informed. Mason and I were roommates at Columbia. He was devastated after your breakup. Not devastated enough to choose differently, Melissa noted, keeping her voice neutral as the ceremony continued. Hudson leaned closer. Want to know something interesting? Mason didn't send that invitation. Melissa's attention snapped fully to Hudson. What? My sister insisted. She found an old photo of you two in Mason's desk drawer, made him tell her everything, then demanded he invite you. Why would she do that? Hudson shrugged. Isla likes to confront things directly, and I think she wanted to see if he was truly over you. Their conversation paused as the officiant asked the guests to rise. After the traditional pronouncement of husband and wife, Melissa watched Mason kiss Isla with appropriate enthusiasm. When he turned to face the guests, his eyes immediately sought Melissa in the crowd. As the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, Melissa noticed an older man glaring at her from across the seating area. His resemblance to Mason was unmistakable. The same strong jaw, the same piercing blue eyes. William Peters, Mason's father. During the reception that followed, Melissa casually circulated, listening more than speaking. Business discussions dominated the wealthy crowd, and she soon overheard something intriguing. Peters Ventures is still trying to secure that Helix Tech acquisition, one man murmured to another over champagne. Without it, they'll lose ground to Westridge. Heard they're on shaky financial ground, his companion replied. William's worried. That's why this merger with Montgomery Industries was so critical. Melissa filed away this information, pieces falling into place. While refilling her champagne, she overheard more, a conversation between Mason and his father in a nearby alcove. She shouldn't be here, William Peters hissed. What were you thinking, inviting her? Isla wanted. I don't care what Isla wanted. That woman is dangerous. She knows too much about our early operations. Melissa won't cause problems, Mason insisted. She's moved on. Look at her. She doesn't care about us anymore. William snorted. She cares about power. Always did. And now she has it. Do you know how many companies she's dismantled? She improves them. She guts them, William corrected harshly. And she's been circling companies in our sector. If she connects the dots about Helix Tech. Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the alcove, but Melissa had heard enough. She slipped away, mind racing. Helix Tech, the innovative software security firm that had rejected acquisition offers from multiple corporations. The company whose CEO had approached Luminary for advice just last month. The company Melissa had secretly purchased through a shell corporation 3 weeks ago. The company Peters Ventures desperately needed to stay afloat. Melissa smiled to herself, understanding dawning. Mason hadn't invited her because he wanted her at his wedding. He'd invited her because he needed to assess how much she knew about his family's business vulnerabilities. This wasn't sentiment, it was corporate reconnaissance. Across the room, Isla watched Mason's constant glances toward Melissa with growing suspicion. The bride's perfect smile had developed a brittle edge, her champagne glass never quite empty. Melissa observed it all with clinical detachment. Mason's father frantically working the room, courting potential investors. Mason dividing his attention between his new wife and his ex-fiancée. Isla's increasing awareness that something wasn't right on her perfect day. As the reception continued, Melissa considered her options. She had come here seeking nothing more than the satisfaction of showing Mason what he had lost. Now, she realized she held far more power than she had anticipated. The question was, what would she do with it? Relationships built on status never last. Would you forgive someone who left you for social climbing? Share your thoughts below. What would you do in Melissa's position? Would you walk away quietly, or would you make sure everyone knew exactly who you'd become? Now, let's see how this wedding toast takes an unexpected turn. Crystal clinked against silver as the best man called for attention. The reception was in full swing. White-gloved waiters circulated with canapés, a string quartet played softly in the corner, and champagne flowed freely among the elite gathering. After Hudson's charming speech about growing up with Isla and meeting Mason, I knew he was either going to be my brother-in-law or my mortal enemy. It was the groom's turn. Mason stood, handsome and confident, in his bespoke tuxedo. He thanked the guests for coming, praised his new wife's beauty and intelligence, and acknowledged his in-laws' generosity. His delivery was polished. Clearly, he'd practiced. "And I'd like to thank fate," he continued, voice carrying across the silent room, "for guiding me to this perfect match. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns to bring you exactly where you belong." His gaze flickered briefly toward Melissa, a subtle gesture most guests wouldn't notice. But Isla noticed. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "In business and in love, making the right connections is everything," Mason added. "Choosing the right partner determines your success." Something inside Melissa shifted. The calculated slight, the implication that she had been the wrong choice. It wasn't just personal. It was Mason performing for his father, for his business associates, for everyone who valued connections over character. Before Mason could continue, Melissa rose gracefully to her feet, champagne glass in hand. The movement drew every eye in the room. "I'd like to propose a toast as well," she said, her voice clear and commanding. The room fell silent. No one had expected this. Mason froze, champagne glass halfway to his lips. William Peters' face darkened. Isla watched with unmistakable curiosity. "To new beginnings," Melissa said, raising her glass, "and to honesty, which seems appropriate on a day dedicated to vows and promises." The guests murmured in confusion, but raised their glasses automatically. "Mason and I have known each other for a long time," she continued. "We met in college, fell in love, got engaged. Then Mason made a choice, his family's expectations over our relationship. It was difficult then, but looking back..." She paused, meeting Mason's increasingly panic-stricken gaze. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter ran through the crowd. "Being left forced me to focus entirely on my goals, to build something of my own without compromise, to become someone who would never again be deemed unsuitable by anyone." William Peters began moving toward her, but Melissa continued smoothly. "Congratulations on your marriage, Mason. I truly hope it brings you happiness. And congratulations on your recent efforts to acquire Helix Tech. It's an impressive company with remarkable potential." Mason's champagne glass nearly slipped from his fingers. His father stopped mid-stride. "How thoughtful of you to invite me today," Melissa continued. "It gives me the perfect opportunity to let you know personally that your acquisition won't be going through." Whispers erupted around the room. Business associates exchanged glances. Isla's father leaned forward, suddenly intent. "You see," Melissa said, still smiling pleasantly, "I purchased Helix Tech 3 weeks ago through Camden Holdings. We're restructuring the entire operation, which unfortunately makes it unavailable for acquisition by Peters Ventures." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet stopped playing. "You? What?" Mason managed, his face draining of color. "Oh, didn't you know Camden Holdings was one of my subsidiaries?" Melissa asked with exaggerated innocence. "I'm surprised. Your father's been negotiating with my team for months." William Peters looked as though he might collapse. "Camden Holdings is yours?" he choked out. Indeed, along with several other investment groups that have been systematically acquiring companies in your supply chain. Melissa's smile remained pleasant, but her eyes were steel. Business is about foresight, after all, something your firm seems to have been lacking recently. Hila stepped forward, her wedding gown rustling. Mason, what is she talking about? Mason couldn't answer, his gaze locked on Melissa in horrified realization. Perhaps Mason should explain later, Melissa suggested kindly. This is your wedding day, after all. Though you might want to ask about Peters Ventures' financial stability before merging any assets with Montgomery Industries. Richard Montgomery's head snapped toward William Peters. What financial stability issues? The room erupted into chaos. Business associates huddled in concerned groups. Wedding guests whispered behind hands. Mason's mother appeared to be on the verge of fainting. Isla grabbed Mason's arm. You told me your family's company was thriving, that this merger was about expansion, not survival. It is, we are, Mason stammered. Melissa is exaggerating. We had a temporary cash flow issue, but... A temporary cash flow issue? William Peters boomed. You've destroyed everything. If you had secured Helix Tech like I told you to. He couldn't secure it, Melissa interjected calmly, because I already owned it. I'm afraid Peters Ventures has been negotiating with my team under the impression they were dealing with a vulnerable CEO eager to sell. In reality, every meeting, every proposal, every disclosure of your business strategy has been carefully documented by my acquisitions department. Hila turned to her father. Daddy, what does this mean? Richard Montgomery's expression had hardened from confusion to fury. It means, Princess, that we've been deceived about the Peters financial situation. This merger was meant to save them, not strengthen both companies. Mason looked desperately between his father and his new wife. Isla, please. But Isla had already stepped away from him, her eyes filled with betrayal. You used me, used my family name, our connections, our money. No, it wasn't like that, Mason pleaded. Melissa set her champagne glass down gently. I believe this is where I make my exit. Congratulations again on your marriage. I do hope it's more honest than your business practices. As she turned to leave, Mason grabbed her arm. You planned this, he hissed. You bought Helix Tech just to ruin me. Melissa looked pointedly at his hand until he released her. Actually, I bought Helix Tech because it's a brilliant company with innovative technology. The fact that you needed it was coincidental. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. But showing everyone exactly who you are? That was just a bonus. She moved gracefully through the stunned crowd, nodding politely to those who stepped aside for her. At the door, she paused to look back once. The perfect wedding had dissolved into chaos. William Peters was shouting at his son. Richard Montgomery was already on his phone, likely calling his lawyers. Hila stood alone by the head table, tears streaming down her perfect makeup. And Mason looked utterly destroyed, watching Melissa leave just as she had watched him walk away 5 years ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on her, but unlike Mason, she felt no satisfaction in another's pain. Only a quiet sense that justice had at last been served. As Melissa stepped into the warm summer evening, she heard Hudson Montgomery's voice behind her. That was quite a wedding gift, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. I believe in giving people exactly what they deserve, she replied, not breaking stride. Her driver opened the Aston Martin's door. Before sliding in, Melissa took one last look at Whispering Oaks Estate, its elegant facade now housing a very different kind of party than planned. For what it's worth, Hudson added, some of us think he made the biggest mistake of his life when he let you go. Melissa offered him a genuine smile. It wasn't his mistake to make. It was my opportunity to seize. With that, she stepped into her car and drove away from the past, leaving chaos in her wake. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating Mason Peters' face as he strode through the marble lobby of Peters Ventures. His suit was impeccable as always, but dark circles beneath his eyes betrayed a sleepless night. The receptionist wouldn't meet his gaze. As he passed the bullpen of junior analysts, conversations hushed. Someone had CNN playing on a monitor, a financial reporter discussing yesterday's society wedding that exposed significant vulnerabilities in Peters Ventures' market position. Mason quickened his pace to the executive floor, praying his father hadn't arrived yet. He needed time to think, to formulate a plan, some way to salvage this disaster. His hopes evaporated when he saw his father's assistant outside the corner office, her expression grim. "He's waiting for you," she said softly. "The board members are all on video conference." Mason's stomach dropped. A board meeting hadn't been scheduled. Emergency sessions only happened when Mason. His father's voice boomed from the office. "Get in here. Now." The corner office, with its sweeping views of Manhattan, had always intimidated Mason. Today, it felt like an execution chamber. His father stood behind his massive desk, face mottled with rage. On the large screen behind him, 8 solemn faces watched from various locations. "Gentlemen," William Peters addressed the screen, "my son has finally decided to join us after single-handedly destroying our company's reputation and scuttling a crucial merger." "Dad, that's not fair." "Shut up," William roared. "Do you have any idea what's happening? Montgomery Industries has publicly withdrawn from our merger agreement. 3 major investors called this morning to pull their funding. Our stock is in free fall." One of the board members, Stanley Wilkerson, cleared his throat. "Mason, perhaps you could explain how you failed to identify that Camden Holdings was a Luminary Solutions subsidiary? This information was critically important to our acquisition strategy." Mason loosened his tie, suddenly finding it difficult to breathe. "Camden Holdings is a private entity with deliberately obscured ownership. We had no reason to." "You had every reason," his father interrupted. "Melissa Campbell was your fiancée. You claimed to know her better than anyone, yet you failed to recognize her strategic moves in our market." Another board member spoke up. "More concerning is why you invited her to your wedding, creating a public platform for this revelation." Mason swallowed hard. "My wife," Ela insisted. "Ex-wife?" William corrected coldly. "Or did you miss the fact that she's filed for annulment this morning? Apparently misrepresenting your financial situation constitutes fraud in a marriage contract." The news hit Mason like a physical blow. "She what? It's been less than 24 hours. The Montgomerys don't waste time when they've been betrayed," William said bitterly. "Something you should have considered before using their daughter to prop up our failing company." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Wilkerson spoke again. "Mason, the board has voted unanimously. Your position as Executive Vice President of Acquisitions is terminated, effective immediately. Your father abstained from the vote, but has expressed agreement with our decision." Mason stared at the screen in disbelief. "You're firing me? Over one acquisition that didn't go through?" "We're firing you," Wilkerson clarified, "for catastrophic negligence that has exposed this company to potential hostile takeover. Miss Campbell now controls enough of our supply chain to make a compelling case to our shareholders that her leadership would be more beneficial than current management." The reality of his situation finally dawned on Mason. Not only had he lost his wife and his position, he'd potentially lost his family's entire company to the woman he'd once abandoned. After the board members disconnected, Mason faced his father alone. "Dad," he began, "we can fix this. I'll talk to Melissa. We had history. Maybe she'll—" "History?" William laughed bitterly. "Yes, you have history. You left her when I told you she wasn't good enough for this family. And now she owns enough of our business interests to destroy everything we've built." "She wouldn't." "Wouldn't she?" William moved around the desk until he stood directly before his son. "She smiled while she demolished your wedding. Imagine what she'll do to our company." Mason ran a hand through his hair. "I need to see her. Explain." "Explain what? That you're sorry you underestimated her? That you wish you'd married her instead, now that she's successful enough to meet our standards?" William's disgust was palpable. "Clear out your office by noon. Security will escort you out." 30 minutes later, Mason stood outside Luminary Solutions' sleek headquarters in Midtown. The modern glass tower reflected clouds racing across the sky. Appropriate, he thought, for a company named after light. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Mr. Peters, do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to see Melissa Campbell. It's urgent." "Miss Campbell is in meetings all day," the young man replied smoothly. "Perhaps you could call to schedule." "Tell her it's Mason. She'll see me." The receptionist looked doubtful, but made the call. After a brief conversation, he pointed toward the elevator. 40th floor, her assistant will meet you. Andrea was waiting when the elevator doors opened. Her professional smile didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Peters, this way, please. She led him through an open workspace where employees watched curiously as he passed. Everyone seemed to know who he was. Melissa's office was exactly as Mason had imagined it. Minimalist, elegant, with views that rivaled his father's. She sat behind a glass desk, reviewing documents on a tablet. When he entered, she looked up calmly. Mason, you look terrible. He hadn't seen himself in a mirror, but he could imagine. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, still wearing yesterday's shirt beneath his suit jacket. You've destroyed my life, he said without preamble. Melissa set down her tablet. Did I force you to lie to your wife about your company's financial situation? Did I make you invite me to witness your deception? Did I suggest you build a marriage on the same false pretenses you ended ours with? Mason sank into the chair across from her. I've lost everything. My job, my marriage, my family's respect. Sounds familiar, Melissa observed, though I only lost 2 out of 3 when you left. Is that what this is, revenge? No, Mason, this is business. She leaned forward. I acquired companies that align with my investment strategy. I attended a wedding I was invited to. I spoke truthfully when addressed. Everything else was your own doing. Bullshit. You knew exactly what would happen. Melissa didn't deny it. Perhaps I anticipated certain outcomes based on intimate knowledge of the parties involved. That's just good business sense. What do you want? Mason asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Money? An apology? What will it take to make this go away? Make what go away, exactly? Your failed marriage? Your terminated position? The fact that your father finally sees you clearly? Melissa's voice remained even. I don't want anything from you, Mason. That's the difference between us now. You've always needed something. Approval, connections, status. I've built a life where I don't need anything from anyone. Mason leaned forward, desperation evident in every line of his body. Please, Melissa. At least tell me you won't take over Peter's ventures. It's my family legacy. A legacy you were willing to sacrifice for social climbing, she interrupted. But rest assured, I have no interest in acquiring Peter's ventures. It's structurally unsound, over-leveraged, and frankly, too entrenched in outdated business models. Relief washed over Mason's face, quickly followed by indignation. Then what was all this for? Just to humiliate me? Melissa stood, signaling that their meeting was concluding. This may surprise you, Mason, but not everything is about you. I built Luminary Solutions to transform failing businesses into thriving ones. Your family's company simply doesn't meet my criteria for salvation. As she walked around the desk, Mason noticed the quiet confidence in her posture, so different from the eager young woman who had once planned a future with him. Our business will fold without Helix Tech, he said quietly. Perhaps, Melissa acknowledged. Or perhaps this will force your father to innovate rather than acquire. Sometimes destruction precedes necessary rebirth. She pressed a button on her desk and Andrea appeared at the door. Andrea, please escort Mr. Peters out. Mason stood slowly. You know, there was a time when I regretted leaving you, when I wondered what our life might have been. And now, Melissa asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Now I realize you would have outgrown me anyway. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Goodbye, Melissa. As Andrea led him toward the elevator, Melissa returned to her desk. Through the glass walls of her office, she watched Mason's defeated posture as he disappeared into the elevator. She felt no triumph, no vindication, only the quiet satisfaction of having finally closed a chapter that had remained unfinished for too long. If you're enjoying this story of comeuppance, make sure to like and subscribe. Our channel features similar tales of triumph and transformation that you won't want to miss. But Melissa's story doesn't end with revenge. 3 weeks later, Melissa sat in her office reviewing the latest reports on Peter's ventures. As she had predicted, the company was approaching bankruptcy. William Peters had stepped down as CEO, replaced by a turnaround specialist from a competing firm. Their stock had stabilized at roughly 30% of its former value. Andrea knocked and entered, tablet in hand. The business journals are calling it the wedding takedown. You've gone viral in financial circles. She placed the tablet on Melissa's desk, displaying a Wall Street Journal article with the headline, Jilted entrepreneur exposes financial fraud at ex's wedding. Melissa skimmed the article with a frown. They've sensationalized it. I didn't expose fraud. I simply revealed information that should have been disclosed to Montgomery Industries before the merger. Still makes for a good story, Andrea pointed out. 3 different producers have called about rights to a film adaptation. Decline them all, Melissa replied. I have no interest in becoming a cautionary tale for men who underestimate women. Her phone chimed with a text message. Melissa glanced at it, surprised to see a name she hadn't thought about in years. Matteo Sevilla. Just read about your wedding appearance. Always knew you were extraordinary, even back in our MBA days. Would love to catch up if you're ever in Chicago. My sustainable energy firm could use your insights. Andrea noticed her expression. Good news? Just an old classmate, Melissa said, setting the phone aside. We competed for the same scholarship at business school. He won. And now he's reaching out. Interesting timing. Melissa smiled slightly. Not everyone who recognizes success is opportunistic, Andrea. Before she could elaborate, her intercom buzzed. Miss Campbell, Gemma Zhao from Artificial Edge is here for your 2 p.m. Send her in, Melissa responded, standing to greet her visitor. Gemma Zhao, founder of Silicon Valley's most innovative AI company, entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention. The women exchanged pleasantries before settling into the comfortable seating area by the windows. I'll be direct, Gemma said after they'd covered preliminary business discussions. I want Luminary to handle Artificial Edge's expansion into European markets. Your work with Helix Tech impressed me. Interesting, Melissa replied. Most people have been more focused on how I revealed Peter's Ventures' instability at a wedding than on the actual business strategy behind the acquisition. Gemma waved dismissively. People love drama. I love results. You identified Helix Tech's potential before anyone else and moved decisively. That's what matters. As they discussed potential collaboration, Melissa's phone chimed again with another message from Matteo. Matteo Sevilla also heard through the grapevine that Isla Peters, née Montgomery, has left her husband and is starting her own investment firm focusing on women-led startups. Thought you'd appreciate the irony. Despite herself, Melissa smiled. She hadn't expected Isla to bounce back so quickly, or so strategically. Perhaps Mason's ex had more substance than Melissa had given her credit for. After Gemma left, Melissa stood at her office window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. The afternoon sun gilded the buildings, transforming glass and steel into something almost magical. This view, this company, this life, she had built it all herself, brick by painstaking brick. 5 years ago, when Mason walked away, she had felt as though her future had collapsed. Now she understood that what had seemed like an ending had actually been the beginning of something far more significant than a marriage could ever have been. Her phone rang, displaying Andrea's extension. Your dinner reservation at Le Bernardin is confirmed for 8 p.m., Andrea informed her. And I've declined those film rights requests as instructed. Melissa hesitated, then made a decision. Andrea, cancel Le Bernardin. I'm going to reschedule, and text Matteo Sevilla back. Tell him I'll be in Chicago next week for the Renewable Energy Conference and would be happy to meet. Going to check out the competition? Andrea asked, amusement in her voice. Going to have dinner with an old friend, Melissa corrected. Someone who knew me before all this. After hanging up, Melissa returned to the window. Below, Manhattan continued its eternal rhythm. People building careers, finding love, experiencing disappointment, and discovering new beginnings. All those lives intertwining, creating the vibrant tapestry of possibility that had drawn her to this city in the first place. She thought about Mason, about the life they might have shared if he had been stronger, if she had been less ambitious, if circumstances had been different. That alternate reality seemed increasingly distant, like a road not taken that had faded from view. Whatever feelings had once existed between them, love, resentment, regret, had been finally laid to rest in that wedding venue. She had attended seeking closure and found something better, confirmation that her path had always been the right one. Her phone chimed with Matteo's response. Matteo Sevilla, looking forward to it. Always knew you'd outshine us all someday. Melissa smiled and slipped the phone into her pocket. The past was settled. The future, with all its possibilities, awaited. 2 months later, Melissa adjusted her earrings as her car pulled up to La Volpe, Chicago's most exclusive Italian restaurant. The maitre recognized her immediately. "Miss Campbell, welcome. Mr. Sevilla is already seated." As she followed him through the dimly lit restaurant, Melissa reflected on how much had changed since that wedding day. Peter's Ventures had been acquired by a Japanese conglomerate, not for its assets but for its client list. Mason had reportedly moved to London to work for a former college friend's investment firm. Ela Montgomery had secured significant funding for her women-focused venture capital firm, already making waves with her first round of investments in female-led tech startups. And Melissa had expanded Luminary Solutions into sustainable energy, partnering with Matteo's firm on a revolutionary solar storage project. Matteo stood as she approached the table, his smile warm and genuine. At 40, he had aged well. Salt and pepper at his temples added distinction to his handsome features. "The unstoppable Melissa Campbell," he greeted her, kissing her cheek. "Still making headlines and breaking barriers." "Hardly breaking barriers these days," she replied as they sat. "Just doing what I've always done. Building empires and occasionally decimating weddings," he teased. Melissa laughed. That was a one-time special event. They ordered wine and fell into easy conversation. Unlike most of her business dinners, this one flowed naturally from topic to topic, from Matteo's sustainable energy innovations to Melissa's expansion plans, from shared memories of cutthroat business school competitions to philosophical discussions about success and fulfillment. "You know," Matteo said as they lingered over dessert, "when you beat me out for that Baker Fellowship in our second year, I was convinced you'd cheated somehow." "Me? Cheat?" Melissa raised an eyebrow. "I outworked everyone." "Exactly, that was the problem." He smiled. "You made the rest of us look lazy by comparison. It was infuriating and impressive." "And now?" "Now I'm glad you won. It pushed me to work harder, think more creatively." He hesitated. "I followed your career, you know, even before the notorious wedding incident." Melissa studied him curiously. "Why?" "Because you were the benchmark," he admitted. "If Melissa Campbell could build something extraordinary, then maybe I could too. You were always the standard I measured myself against." The honesty in his voice touched her. Unlike Mason, who had resented her ambition, Matteo had been inspired by it. "I'm giving a TED Talk next month," she said suddenly, "about resilience in business and life. Would you come? I'd value your perspective." "I wouldn't miss it," he replied, "on one condition." "Which is?" "That afterward you let me show you my favorite spot in Chicago." No business talk, no networking, just two old rivals enjoying the view. Something warm unfurled in Melissa's chest, not the fierce determination that had driven her for years, but something gentler, something like possibility. "I'd like that," she said simply. Later, as her car took her back to her hotel, Melissa gazed out at Chicago's illuminated skyline. She thought about the path that had led her here. The heartbreak that had forged her resolve, the challenges that had honed her skills, the success that had validated her choices. Mason Peters had once been the center of her world, then the catalyst for her transformation. Now he was simply a chapter in her story, important for what it had taught her, but no longer defining who she was or what she wanted. Tomorrow, she would review acquisition proposals, meet with potential clients, and continue building her empire. But tonight, she allowed herself to wonder about new beginnings, about connections based on mutual respect rather than social advantage, about a future shaped not by what she had lost, but by what she had created. As the car pulled up to her hotel, Melissa checked her phone one last time. A message from Matteo lit up the screen. "Already looking forward to that TED Talk. You always did have the most compelling vision of anyone I knew." Melissa smiled and stepped out into the Chicago night, ready for whatever came next. The past had made her who she was, but it no longer controlled where she was going. She had arrived, not just at success, but at the freedom to define that success on her own terms. And in the end, that was the sweetest victory of all. Life has a fascinating way of bringing us full circle, doesn't it? Melissa's journey from heartbreak to triumph reminds us that sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the foundation for our greatest achievements. The very rejection that once devastated her ultimately shaped her into someone unstoppable. Have you ever had to prove someone wrong about you? How did it change you? Did you, like Melissa, discover strengths you never knew you had? Or perhaps, like Mason, you've realized too late the value of what you carelessly discarded? Thank you for being part of our story family here at Sage King Stories. Your presence and engagement mean everything to us. We craft these tales of human resilience and transformation especially for you. For more stories about triumph and transformation, subscribe to Sage King Stories and join our growing community of narrative explorers. Each week, we journey together through the complexities of the human experience. Stay resilient, stay true, and remember that success is the best response to doubt. Until next time, this is Sage King, wishing you strength on your own journey of becoming.